We're on.
Welcome to Earth Day 2021. To begin the celebration, we will open with a land acknowledgement from Adam Goff.
Good evening, everyone. We begin this program in Northern Illinois on the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations. Many other tribes, such as the Miami, Menominee, Ho-Chunk, Sauk, and Fox, also call this area home. We name these in honor and respect.
There are very important initiatives at the state level going on to help our planet recover from climate change. We're lucky to have a climate warrior representing this district, Representative Robin Gable. After she makes some brief remarks, we'll have a short Q&A. You can write your questions in the YouTube chat, and we'll share them with her. Representative Gable, welcome. Tell us about the Clean Energy Jobs Act in Springfield.
Thank you, Lucinda. I really appreciate your introduction, and thank you, Adam, for recognizing people who were here long before us. I'm actually in Springfield. We are on the floor. I went behind the chamber and found a little office to be in for a few minutes to take off my mask and talk to you. So last year, I think I talked to you a lot about the Clean Energy Jobs Act. I went into a lot of detail about what it does, and I think that I hope you remember what I said. A lot of it was about renewable energy and making sure that we have fairness and justice in the way that we implement it, and especially look to communities that have been affected wrongly by the environment, as well as communities that are moving away from fossil fuels, and we want to make sure that there's jobs for those communities as well. So so last year when the pandemic hit, that really it made it impossible for us to meet. You can't get together with 188 people in a room during a pandemic. So we just started meeting again last month in person, and we were doing some via Zoom, and now we're back in Springfield working full time, and so as you know, the Clean Energy Jobs Act is very important to me. And with the new speaker, I was honored to be put into leadership. So now I'm on the new speaker's leadership team, which gives me an opportunity to speak to him a lot more. And I went to him and I said, it's very important that we pass CEJA this year. We have to do something on energy. And he said, well, okay, because the governor's office is working on it. I said, but they're really not getting very far. I said, I think we need to take some leadership and start moving it in the House. He said, let me think about it. And a day later, his chief of staff called me and said, okay, Robin, we want you and 2 other legislators to lead up our energy work in the House and to finally get this passed over the finish line. So that was a couple of weeks ago. And since then, we've been organizing ourselves. We decided to organize with the Senate. It didn't make sense to do 2 separate bills, so we'll be working with them and moving ahead. We're involving a lot of the advocates who've worked on these issues and a lot of the experts who really know how to get this done. So I am very encouraged. I'm excited. I'm thrilled, and I think that we're going to be able to do this by May 31st. So that's good news, and I just wanted you to know that we're working hard on this. That doesn't mean that you should give up your advocacy on it. Keep it up until we're over the finish line. So that's my update from Springfield on our clean energy, and I look forward to hearing some of the presentations. As long as I can stay back here, I have a bill coming up, so I need to get back on the floor. But I would love to hear some of the other statements around celebrating Earth Day. Thank you.
So I think we had it planned in here that we were going to ask you some questions. Do you have time?
Oh,
for
right,
that?
right. Sure.
All right. So I wanted to know, are there other states implementing similar plans?
Are there other states implementing some of our plans? I am not sure. I think I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Can't answer that question. I'll look it up and get back to you.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good.
I have a question. I know that it may change the economics of jobs in Illinois going forward. What kind of trajectory do you imagine or that you're prepared to at least predict at this point about the number of jobs that will enter into the economy and how the injection of capital from the state or the federal or however else the funds come in will affect the economy going forward?
I do think that this is going to be one of the growing sectors of our economy. I know that once we passed FIJA in 2017, that Illinois had more startups in solar than any other Midwestern state. I think that we are predicting tens of thousands of jobs, and the additional funds from the government are going to be incredibly useful. A lot of it is one-time dollars, but we can build what are they? Those stations where you recharge, charging stations. We can, there's a lot of first-time expenses that we can use those funds for. So I think we're very excited about being able to share some of the dollars that we do get from the federal government, infrastructure dollars and other funds. And I think it's going to be an incredible boom to Illinois' economy.
Lovely, thank you. So happy Earth Day, everyone. I'm Lucinda, one of your two MCs this evening.
And I am your other MC, Xander. Earth Day is always important, but this year it has a special significance because we have all been physically isolated from each other, and that's been really hard. Yet we are all spinning around the same sun on the same planet we call home. Now we will have a poem written by Amanda Gorman called Earthrise.
On Christmas Eve, 1968, astronaut Bill Anders snapped a photo of the Earth as Apollo 8 orbited the moon. Those three guys were surprised to see from their eyes a planet looked like an Earthrise, a blue orb hovering over the moon's gray horizon with deep oceans and silver skies. It was our world's first glance at itself, a first chance to see a shared reality, a declared stance, and a commonality, a glimpse into our planet's mirror. And as threats drew nearer, our own urgency became clearer as we realized that we hold nothing dearer than this floating body we all call home. We've known that we're caught in the throes of climactic changes some say will just go away, while some simply pray to survive another day. For it is the obscure, the oppressed, the poor who, when the disaster is declared done, still suffer more than anyone. Climate change is the single greatest challenge of our time. Of this, you're certainly aware. It's saddening, but I cannot spare you from knowing an inconvenient fact, because it's getting the facts straight that gets us to act and not to wait. So I tell you this not to scare you, but to prepare you, to dare you to dream a different reality where despite disparities, we all care to protect this world, this riddled blue marvel, this little true marvel, to master the verve and the nerve to see how we can serve our planet. You don't need to be a politician to make it your mission to conserve, to protect, to preserve that one and only home that is ours. To use your unique power to give next generations the planet they deserve. We are demonstrating, creating, advocating. We heed this inconvenient truth because we need to be anything but lenient with the future of our youth. And while this is a training in sustaining the future of our planet, there is no rehearsal. The time is now, because the reversal of harm and protection of a future so universal should be anything but controversial. So, Earth, pale blue dots, we will fail you not, just as we chose to go to the moon. We know it's never too soon to choose hope. We choose to do more than cope with climate change. We choose to end it. We refuse to lose. We do this and more, not because it's very easy or nice, but because it is necessary. Because with every dawn, we carry the weight of the fates of this celestial body orbiting a star. And as heavy as that weight sounded, it doesn't hold us down, but it keeps us grounded, steady, ready, because an environmental movement of this size is simply another form of an Earthrise. To see it, close your eyes, visualize that all of us in this room and outside of these walls or in these halls, all of us change makers, or in a spacecraft floating like a silver raft in space, and we see the face of a planet anew. We relish the view, we witness its round green and brilliant blue, which inspires us to ask deeply, wholly, what can we do? Open your eyes, know the future of this wise planet is right in sight, right in all of us. Trust this earth uprising, all of us bring light to exciting solutions never tried before, for it is our hope that implores us at our uncompromising core to keep rising up for an earth more than worth fighting for.
That was beautiful. Next, we have a greeting from our Congresswoman from Illinois' 9th Congressional District, Representative Jan Schakowsky. Jan continues to be a Green leader in Congress, and we appreciate her participation in our Earth Day event. Representative Schakowsky.
Hi, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky here to wish you a very, very happy Earth Day. I remember the first one in 1970. That's 51 years ago, when people were just waking up to the idea that we had to do actively something to protect our environment, to protect the planet, to protect the people living on it and the animals on it. And we began with Earth Day 51 years ago. I wish I could say that since then we've made progress. We have, in the sense that the first one, there were about 20 million Americans who were involved in that. It was a US initiative. And now there are 190 countries all over the world, obviously, that celebrate Earth Day. But we have to act. And I want to tell you, it was 2006 when Al Gore won the the Academy Award for An Inconvenient Truth. And we thought that was going to be a big wake up. Well, just last week, Al Gore did a presentation of an updated Inconvenient Truth for members of Congress. And of course, we have seen the melting of the ices, the disappearance of certain species, the dangers to the oceans, and of course, the dangers every day of not acting. But you know what else he said? In addition to some of this activating, inspiring for action information, he said, this is a great time to be alive. This is the greatest time to be alive because it is us, the people right now who are alive that can make the difference to be sure that our planet is safe for our children and our grandchildren. And I want to talk a bit about young people because I feel that on this issue, we have really seen the youth in our country and really around the world. Greta Thunberg, for example, who went as a 13-year-old to the United Nations and scolded them and said, we will never forgive you if you don't act on this, and has been working ever since to try and get young people involved. And actually, we have seen leadership in our city, in our state, and in our country, and in our world of young people. And I want to say thank you because I know many of you helped put together this celebration in Evanston. But it is also a special day for me. I have introduced the Children's Fundamental Rights and Climate Recovery Resolution. And it puts young people in the forefront, saying that their fundamental rights to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness have actually been compromised because of the climate crisis that we face right now. And so that resolution will be introduced. I serve on the climate subcommittee, the environmental subcommittee, in the Energy and Commerce Committee, and we are working hard. But we need a mass mobilization of people around the country and around the world to say no more. This is existential. Life, human life, animal life on this planet is being threatened right now. Now, the planet itself will survive past us if we actually get to that point and probably thrive. But we want to make sure that generation after generation is able to have a sustainable, breathable, drinkable, soil-rich planet to live on. So thank you, Evanston. I know you're always in the forefront of these kinds of progressive movements, and I thank you for that and wish you once again a very happy and progressive Earth Day.
Thank you, Representative Schakowsky. The ETHS Vocal Jazz Ensemble hasn't met in person for a long time, but they have continued to rehearse and record wonderful songs. They have recorded a song for Earth Day on a theme we can appreciate very well. We would like to thank Sarah Zagri, chorus director, and members of the ETHS Vocal Jazz Ensemble for the recording of Wonderful World we are about to enjoy.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for ye hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Now, Evanston actor and singer Greg Tertullian will share an original song called Catch the Rain. Welcome, Greg.
All right, my name is Greg Tertullian. I'll be performing a song I wrote called Catch the Rain. Basically talks about how we need to pay attention to the natural things around us, the air, and just take it all in rather than just focus on technology and so forth. So here's Catch the Rain. Wake up and smell the fresh air. Look around and see what's out there. Take a hit on the parts of life we overlook. I get up and see the bits of the sun on me. Little rays lying down warm and welcoming. I see the multicolored leaves falling down. Hear the bugs in the distance make a sound. The little birds wide eyed singing in the morning. Soaring high in the sky where the clouds are forming. A cool breeze, little scream, flowing trees, a young bee in the flower making rounds. Flash forward to a different time. The sky's gray and there's nothing dry. The rain falls in the city, quiets down as they hide and the water hits the ground. Put a bucket out to catch the rain. Look for the beautiful sit to complain. Catch the rain, lay back and be amazed of all the little simple things, yeah. Wake up and smell the fresh air. Look around and see what's out there. Take a hit on the parts of life we overlook. Wake up and smell the fresh air. Look around and see what's out there. Take a hit on the parts of life we overlook. Take your time, but don't waste your time. Just one deep breath and be re-energized. Lay your hand out the window against the wind upon the sand and take all the feeling in. Think about all the things you've been missing. John Cage in the woods, just listen. A cool breeze, flowing trees, dancing leaves, a flying bag in the midst of it all. Close your eyes, fantasize, feel the grass, free your mind, forget the time you take behind. Self-care, cause 9 to 5, live your life, stay upright, visualize your only limit is the blue, stunning sky. Put a bucket out to catch the rain. Look for the beautiful sit to complain. Catch the rain, lay back and be amazed of all the little simple things, yeah. Wake up and smell the fresh air. Look around and see what's out there. Take a hit on the parts of life we overlook. Wake up and smell the fresh air. Look around and see what's out there. Take a hit on the parts of life we overlook. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Elizabeth Morales is a 7th grade teacher in the Chicago Public Schools. She taught a lesson to raise students' awareness of the rising toll of plastic garbage, which is killing species and destroying habitats. She will tell us about it now. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. Happy Earth Day. Can I get permission to share my presentation?
You have it.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. I work in Chicago. I work in Little Village, and the following lesson that I'm about to show you is something that I did for one of my graduate classes with Professor Kristen Lenz, and we worked on a lesson regarding sustainability, specifically targeting English language learners. And the purpose of this lesson was to raise awareness and also to garner that passion for sustainability from my students. Also to show them what is happening, you know, in the ocean with the garbage and the consumption of products. When I first learned about this, it was something that really invigorated me and just gave me a passion for environmentalism, because prior to this assignment, I honestly did not know that this was such a huge problem. And I wanted to share that with my students. So I wanted them to be aware of what was happening in the ocean, and then think about how we contribute, and also think about solutions that, you know, steps that we can take to be part of the solution. 1 second. So we wanted to just, this was part of a bigger unit where we discussed global warming and climate change. That was one of our main focus, but again, I wanted to really make sure that I was passing on what I had learned to my students, because for me, this was also the beginning of my journey in environmentalism. And when I think about it, it's so late, you know, I'm in my 30s, like it's so late into just into my adulthood. I wish I had known about this a lot earlier, especially because as I went through this lesson with my students and through the unit, so many of them showed that they had a lot of interest in this specific topic, and they were really concerned about the fate of our environment. The first part of our lesson, we began with a do now. It was a virtual gallery walk. Students got on their Chromebooks, and we went through a website on the National Geographic site where they talked specifically about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and they had different images followed with captions describing what was in the image. And this was something that was very powerful and that had a very lasting impact on my students. And I knew that it was going to move them, and in a way where they would want to just know more and to be part of a solution and think about small habits that they can begin to change in their daily lives in order to begin to reducing just the amount of garbage that we put into the world and into the ocean. It's, it ends up being in the middle of the ocean and affecting the ecosystems there, the animals there. So one of the first images that this lesson began with was really powerful. It's of the map of the garbage patches in the Pacific Ocean, and you can see how large they are. I know the images might be a little bit small here, but you can see that they take up a really large portion of the water and they get caught in the currents. You can compare them to the different continents, and this image was really striking because, first of all, they didn't know that this even existed. It's not really common knowledge. So I hope that, you see this as well and you can share this with family, with friends, because this was something that I was also not aware of. And once I saw this, it just blew my mind that this is happening, and we're still contributing to the problem, and we need to move a little bit faster, or a lot faster, to find a solution for problems like this. Another image that really stood out and that developed a lot of discussion with my students was the one of the albatross with its belly open, and you can see different contents in its stomach, like plastic bottle caps. It looks like plastic bags, just a lot of plastic that ended up in the ocean, and this animal ended up consuming and passing, dying from it. Also, the other image to the right shows different items that were retrieved from some of these garbage patches, and this led to discussions about how some of these items, some of my students had, like the costume, the Batman mask. Some of these toys look very old. We also talked about how long have these items been in the ocean. That led to a discussion about how plastic does not decompose, and how so many of the products that we buy on a daily basis are made out of plastic, and they just end up in the ocean or in landfills for years, for decades. Here you can see more images that we discussed. Just shows how big the garbage is and how big the garbage patches are. And also, not only are they widespread, they're also very dense and very thick, therefore making it a really big problem for cleanup and again for the animals in the ocean. We talked about microplastics. Some of my students had brought up, comments that some of their parents use face wash with microplastics in them and beads, and they had no clue that this tiny plastic would have such a big impact. And we just discussed how plastic in general, it does not decompose for millions of years, and it's going to be here, if we don't find ways or put pressure on corporations to find more sustainable and different materials to make the daily products that we use. Because yes, it's our responsibility, but also we need to demand that the products that we consume are made from things that are biodegradable. Another image that was really striking to my students was, of course, seals and turtles that we saw on the gallery that were getting trapped in nets or getting, garbage straw stuck in their noses. Here's a turtle that, we've seen many images. It's kind of a common image that we've seen of turtles getting stuck in nets or having plastic, in straws in their noses. But these images were very powerful because they show the harm that we're doing, and it just really puts it into perspective, the effect that all of this garbage that is getting put into the ocean, into the land, and then eventually ends up in the middle of the ocean is having on ocean life. After the do now, we then began to talk about our carbon footprint. So we wanted to figure out how are we contributing to not only the garbage problem, but also the pollution here on Earth. So students took a survey that was very accessible to their level. The questions were easy for them to understand. It was relatable, something that they do, pertaining to something they do on their daily lives. So for example, do you eat a lot of fast food? How do you get to school? Things like that. Also, how do you travel when you go to visit family members? How many soft drinks do you drink per week or per day? How big is your household? And this activity led to a really good discussion, because after we did this, we then charted our results. Students would get a percentage of how deep their carbon footprint is, and then we would chart their percentage, and it led to a really good discourse about why some of our students had a lower carbon footprint and why some had higher. And when we were comparing two of my students, one of them lives close to the school, a block away. He walks to school. Most of his family is in the area, so he doesn't really travel. His family doesn't own a car, so if they ever need to go anywhere, they take the bus, they take the train, or they carpool with other family members. And then we had another student who has family in Puerto Rico who he visits very often, so he flies back and forth once or twice a year. He doesn't live that close to the school, so his mom drops him off in a car. And we discussed about how transportation was a big contributor to his carbon footprint and also to pollution overall. But we also discussed about things like fast food and how they just produce a lot of garbage. And sometimes if we can avoid it, maybe eat inside the restaurant. We just discussed different solutions to cut out some of the garbage that we produce on a daily basis. We then finished the lesson with an exit ticket. So I wanted students to reflect on their carbon footprint, but also consider that, yes, they need to make changes in their daily habits, because the importance of habits is just critical to sustainability and to climate change. But also I wanted them to understand that it's not just them, that it's also, the mega wealthy and the corporations, that we need to demand from them change as well. And the exit ticket was a short clip of two celebrities, DJ Khaled and Kanye West. They met up in an airport in their private jets to exchange shoes. And we discussed how this was a very selfish and very wasteful way of, meeting up and just exchanging an item. So we had already discussed how transportation was a huge contributor to our carbon footprint and pollution. And then with this, we kind of connected everything that we had discussed. It was a really great activity. And I know that my students still talk about this unit that we did when they were in 7th grade. And it really had a lasting impact. It really motivated them to want to do something different. And I think that the younger that we're giving this information, the more quickly we're able to make these changes, and that's so important. So I hope that this information inspires you to maybe share this with somebody else, with a friend, a family, whoever, because it's just important to know how big of a problem this is, and we need to take action immediately. And it starts with us, and also demanding change from, corporations and other people as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I want to take this moment to share with you one of my favorite quotes from the 20th century author and naturalist Henry Beston. We need another and a wiser and perhaps a more mystical concept of animals. We patronize them for their incompleteness, for their tragic fate for having taken form so far below ourselves. And therein we do error. For the animal shall not be measured by man. In a world older and more complete than ours, they move finished and complete, gifted with the extension of the senses we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They are not brethren, they are not underlings, they are other nations, caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendor and travail of the earth. That's the perfect quote to help introduce our next guest, my brilliant environmental writing teacher, Erin Caffel. We will see a short film based on a piece Erin wrote called Becoming Ocean. During the film, you will have a chance to ask questions or give comments in the YouTube description. We will bring those questions and comments to Erin and have a few minutes to speak with her about the film and her climate activism. Please enjoy Becoming Ocean.
There are times when I feel the water all through the world, as if it's become me. Or maybe, as if I've been given the gift of becoming ocean. The sound of the water is inside my body, in my skin, and my cells, and my organs, like a music I am alone in hearing. The ocean sound is in my body because my kidneys are failing, and slowly, ever so slowly, I am drowning. I've been drowning all of my life, sort of. I was born with polycystic kidney disease, PKD, with DNA that makes my kidneys form fluid-filled cysts. The cysts fill slowly over a lifetime, unseen in the deep black quiet of my body, until one day there is simply too much liquid, and the veins and arteries are cut off from each other, from my circulatory system, from my other organs, and the kidneys themselves shut down, letting fluid and poison back up into my blood. Or until some great and wonderful intervention comes my way. A transplant, pills, dialysis, robotic organs, magic. I was diagnosed at 22, fresh from a youth spent in hospital rooms occupied by my father and his sister and brother, all of whom had the same disease. I sat by bedsides and dialysis chairs, in waiting rooms, in churches and mortuaries for funerals and wakes. I scattered ashes. I was diagnosed by my father's nephrologist. Your PKD is advanced for your age, he told me flatly. You'll have about 5 years of health, then your blood pressure will spike, you'll get fatigued easily, you'll never have a baby, you'll go through menopause, your kidneys will fail, you'll be well, normal, until you're not. In his words, I saw the course of my father's illness, the course of my aunt's. I saw my uncle in his wheelchair after a stroke. I saw my parents' marriage, the alcohol they used to dull the fear. I saw the way that everyone looked at me, the last child of the line, the one who could get away, the one who surely didn't have the gene. I am Irish and earnest and talky, and in the fresh waves of grieving for what I thought my life would be, I told strangers I was dying. They looked at me, a vibrant girl of 23, rosy-cheeked with strangely large blue eyes, and they thought I was exaggerating, or overdramatic, or mistaken. And in their looks, I realized I would be alone in knowing that my body was changed, was changing, its waters rising invisibly, inevitably, toward flood. I came late to the diagnosis of climate change, joined a line of people who knew the monster already, had watched it remake the planet for years. I slipped into the company of 1,000 Cassandras all over the globe, whose warnings only create more distance between themselves and the rest of the world. But for me, listening to them was no different than listening to my father and his siblings talk about the monster of our illness. Only this time, the loss wasn't ours. It was everyone's. Everyone was drowning. With my diagnosis, I entered the family of those who knew what would kill them. When I saw climate change at last, I came into the family of those who knew what would destroy the world. And the world, in its warmest year ever, is being destroyed. In a year where Paris and Louisiana and Haiti and Bangladesh and Texas flooded and California burned and Montana and Canada too, in a world where we have passed 400 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, and the ice caps are melting, and the seas are rising, and the coral is bleaching. We can, if we want, choose to see none of it. Our denial can stay intact. It has been 23 years since my diagnosis, and the darkness of my illness isn't here yet. For a long time, I waited and I worried, but the catastrophe never came. What has come has been slow and subtle. First, a shift of energy, a small infection, a pain that came and went. Then my circulatory system slowed. I got colder in the winters, was unable to bear the heat of summer. I couldn't eat certain foods without my skin itching, my body swelling. Then there was a day I turned a corner, and I was never out of pain again. And although my kidneys continue to grow, taking up more space in my abdomen, the cysts multiplying faster every year, altering my blood pressure, my breathing, my sleep. On the outside, I seem well, myself, unchanged. And now, in the days when our newly elected regime works to erase both illness and climate change from American discussion, to deny, reject, and defeat public discourse about both, I see that what is so deeply set in my cells has a mirror in the molecules of the air. Just as my end is being written by every subtle change in my bloodstream, the end of the world is being written by every subtle change in the atmosphere. But all this subtlety, so easy to ignore, so quickly rendered invisible by the haze of denial, requires bravery to see. It requires openness to reality, science, experts, a willingness to feel vulnerable, to feel fear without shutting down. Those are not the easiest human qualities to muster, but in my experience, a terminal diagnosis is one that must be faced. It's not the water's fault that it's gone where I don't want it in my body or in the world. The water's only doing what it does. But as I listen to the music it makes in myself, to the work of it on others' lives, I grow more awake and I grow stronger. I know in the most intimate of ways what the people in power want the world to ignore. I don't take pleasure in it, but I'm less afraid, more connected, and better able to change in the face of reality. I could not keep from writing about the flooding of the world when I flooded from within. I had to see the beauty and the terror and still learn to fight. But anyone can take that power from the water. Anyone can see the climate crisis clearly, not only the dying. It is not necessary to drown to become ocean.
That was amazing. Thank you. Now Erin will talk briefly about the film, and you all out there can ask questions in the chat for her to answer. Welcome, Erin.
Hello. Thank you so
What
much
a-
for
What
having
a
me.
beautiful piece that always reaches me, no matter how many times I see it. While we gather the post in the chat, could you tell us what it's meant to you to make and release the film?
Oh, yeah, it's been an incredible process. The film actually is a couple of years old now. I think you can tell because we still have the previous administration being highlighted and not the new and amazing things that are happening in the current administration in regards to the environment. But it first was an essay that I wrote and was looking for a way to publish it when a friend of mine who's a filmmaker read the essay and we started working on the movie. And it's been incredible to collaborate with Scott, who's just an amazing artist, but also to be able to take this film to lots of places that my essays might not reach. We've been to quite a number of film festivals, and the nice thing about doing that is that you get to have conversations about the work, and it hits people differently when you have a film versus when you just have words on a page. So I have that same response that you do, Lucinda. Every time I see it, I kind of choke up. I get to see my mom and my grandmothers and my dad again, and that's a really visceral experience that you don't get any other way. As you're gathering the questions, one thing I always want to point out, because I think it's a great part of the film itself, is that the music that's underneath it is written by a collaborator of mine that I've worked on records with before. And there's so many different ways to present the difficult information about what's happening to the climate and to the planet. And I think so many of them can be really hard to watch or hard to listen to, but great teaching like Elizabeth's curriculum, great poetry, great songwriting can really make a difference in the way that people respond to it because it presents the information in ways that are easier to handle. So Josh Dumas, who is the man who made the the soundtrack essentially for the movie, the score, took all of the climate change data, really sea level rise data globally from the time of my birth in 1971. So just the year after the first Earth Day. My birthday's tomorrow, so a year and a day after the first Earth Day I was born. And he took all of that climate data and made it into a musical form. So that's what you hear behind everything. That slight like rising and falling music is a musical version of that mathematical information about the planet.
Oh, that's really amazing. Now I want to just watch it again and listen for it.
Yeah, it's really cool. It was all the way up until the date that we released the movie. So,
yeah. So was it difficult for you to convert a piece of writing into this new art form?
I don't think I would have thought of it in the same way that Scott did. And what's great about when you work with other people, if you feel confident in your words and you feel confident in the collaboration, you can kind of just hand it over and have them show you what they saw in the material. Scott planned all of it, filmed all of it, edited it. He actually took, if you ever go to, it was published in Al Jazeera last year, just right before the pandemic hit. And so you can read the entire essay, which is much longer than the text of the film. And he compressed it down to just a few pages, just the most essential information, and then conveyed so much of the emotional impact through what he chose to film. It was a really fun process, actually, because a lot of the filming was, some footage was of oceans on the East Coast, even the Maldives. There's some footage from the Maldives from another project that he had worked on, which I think is really significant for me because the Maldives are probably the nation that's under the most pressure from sea level rise globally. It's facing potential extinction because it's one of the lowest above sea level country in the world. It's also majority Muslim. So some of the footage was from elsewhere, but also some of it was from here at Lake Michigan. And he came out and filmed water on my skin, filmed all these different sorts of visual pieces of language to use to convey the message of the film. And I just think he did an incredibly beautiful job. I liked being mostly hands-off on the film so that he could sort of present it to me and be like, look what I made with what you wrote. And it was amazing.
That's lovely. That's lovely.
I think that one of the things we talked about before, Lucinda, and I don't know if this question came up today, but one thing that I've been asked is where has this shown and what kind of an impact has it had? So I can talk a little bit about that. The process of making a short film usually involves trying to have it appear in film festivals. And what's wonderful is that there's an incredibly large community of film festivals that focus on environmental issues and that are national and international that show short films. So this movie played internationally, actually. It played at a large number of film festivals here in the States, including the Sedona Film Festival and the Freeland Film Festival in Wisconsin. It also played at this wonderful film festival that I feel like anyone watching an Earth Day program should know about, which is the Wild and Scenic Film Festival. It's based in California, and it actually began as an offshoot of a community conservation effort to protect the South Yuba River, which is there in the hills of California. And the community that had come together to protect the river decided that they wanted to showcase environmental issues. And so they started a film festival, and they run it every year. They invite people from all over the world to come and show their documentaries and their work around the climate and around nature. And then they make those films available to people all over the country. So if you look at their website, you can find a way to actually bring the film festival to your own community. And you can choose from their catalog of lots of different movies. So through that, my film actually played in my hometown, in Maine, which is part of what I write about. So that was really a great experience to see the network of people trying to get the messages of conservation out to the rest of the world.
Can we get the name of that film festival again?
Yeah, it's called the Wild and Scenic Film Festival. And the movie also was able to go to Morocco, to the International Film Festival that was being held in Morocco, Environmental Film Festival, and also to a film festival in Amsterdam, which was actually canceled from the pandemic, but went online.
I think we're having a lot of people saying that they're having trouble coming up with questions because you articulated it so well already.
Well, I'll just mention also that this is part of a much larger project that I've been working on for multiple years. I'm in the middle of drafting the book that this is part of, which, as you can imagine, goes into much more depth about the connection between the ocean and my experience. One thing I think is important to mention, which isn't mentioned in the movie, is that my mother was actually a hydrogeologist. She got her training in geology, and then during my childhood worked for the Department of Environmental Protection in Massachusetts and did river cleanup, essentially. So looking at what industry pollution was doing to the watershed that went down into the Atlantic Ocean from where we lived in Western Massachusetts. So the work that I do is very much inspired by generations of women before me who were scientists. My grandmother, her mom was actually a scientist that studied sports physiology, but her PhD was used by NASA. So I love to acknowledge that this work comes from a lineage of people just coming at the same problem over and over again over generations. And I know that we have this beautiful group of youth activists here who are trying to bring their energy and support and care to this huge problem. But what I love to remind people is that it's a lineage that goes a long way back with lots of people carrying the same weight and trying to make changes that will protect all of us. I was lucky enough to grow up with that directly. And the book that I'm working on is very much about that. What does legacy and generation mean? And I think it's important for us all to remember that no one generation bears the brunt of making it all better. We have to all work on it together, and we all pass the torch as we go.
Yeah, that was so inspiring. Thank you. Thank you.
I had a question for you, actually. Would you talk more about what you mean by a terminal diagnosis?
Yeah.
As it relates to climate change?
Yeah, I think I've thought about this a lot in the last couple of years since the film came out. And I think if I were writing it today, I would probably write it a little bit differently. One thing I'm really interested in people recognizing is that we're all going through a period of deep mourning for the way that we used to experience the planet, right? But it's, I think what when you say mourning or when you say terminal diagnosis, I think what sometimes happens to people is that they emotionally shut down and they think, well, it's over then, right? What I hope is that by recognizing what's true in my own story, one can recognize that a terminal diagnosis, as in the disease I have is life-threatening. There isn't a cure for it, right? I was diagnosed 23 years ago. I'm still relatively to the trajectory of this disease extremely healthy. And as I've waited through those 23 years and addressed the issue and thought about it and addressed it with medical treatments and diet and all the other things that I do to try and stay healthy, I've also been just biding my time while other things catch up, right? So there are the kinds of interventions that are available for people with end-stage renal disease, as I might have someday, are completely different than they were when I was diagnosed. So I got what could have been, what was for my father, my grandfather, a terminal diagnosis, but it isn't working like that in my own life. I have a genetic illness, which means that there are people who are coming after me. I have a kid. And thinking about what the trajectory of if my child has the illness, what that looks like is very different as well. So this notion that like we get really bad news about the planet or the environment, and then we lock down. That is something that I think we should all be avoiding. It's possible to get really bad news, even to be mourning something, even to be mourning a loss, and still figure out how to go forward, because there is something after that. I like to say that grieving is something you do in private. It's the gut punch, the terrible feeling that you have the first time that, as Elizabeth articulated so well, the first time you recognize what the science is, it can be really devastating. But the second step of that is what we do in public, and that's mourning. Mourning has rituals, mourning has conversations, mourning has a way forward, right? Where we can recognize that there is loss, but there is a future out there, even in our own lives, even if they're challenged by something as complex as a disease.
Thank you so much, Erin. What an honor to have you here and see your work. And for those interested in seeing the film again, there is a link in the YouTube description.
Great. Thank you all so much for making this possible.
And now we have a poem by Nizami Ward called A Girl from the City. Nizami.
Hi, Yata. Yata Sha'e, Najoni Ward Unisha, Nasha Tapahan Nishle, Bilagana Bashishin Deshini Deshishe, Chakta Deshinella, Shimato Shaja Lan Osbido, James Roboya. Hello, everyone. My name is Najoni Ward. I am Zuni Edgewater, born for Caucasian. My maternal grandfather is Star of the Red Streak people, and my paternal grandfather is Choctaw. My parents are Leanne Osby and James Ward. So, my poem is called A City Girl, a girl from the city. And it's really about being an urban native, especially in city life. I was born on the Navajo reservation in Tuba City, Arizona, and then I moved out here. So I'm also Miss Teen Globe, Illinois, or Miss Teen Globe, Illinois and United States, as well as Junior Miss Indian Chicago. And I actually wrote this poem in French for a contest that my school is holding, and I got in with I won the contest, and I also got in the Edda magazine, which is like an literary arts magazine for our school. So I'll start the poem now. So she was born in Tuba City, Arizona, on a small Navajo reservation, a young baby girl, half Navajo, a quarter Choctaw, and a quarter Caucasian. At age 2, she moved to Illinois. She lived here for most of her life. Her label, a city girl. Many believed she lost her culture, she lost her identity, she lost who she is. She's being consumed by society and its ways, but deep down, she knows who she is. She's Native American. She walks in beauty and carries her ancestors along her journey. She holds 2 titles as Junior Miss Indian Chicago and Miss Teen Globe United States. She can sing in Navajo and introduce herself in Navajo. She jingle dances and basket dances. She may live off her reservation, but she takes it everywhere she goes. She holds her family's name high, as well as herself. Her name is Najoni Ward. She's still half Navajo, a quarter Choctaw, and a quarter Caucasian. She may be a city girl, but she knows who she truly is. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nijani. Now, we're happy to have greetings from our incoming mayor, Daniel Biss.
Good evening. Thank you, Xander. Thank you, Kristen Lems, and to the Unitarian Church of Evanston Green Team. My name is Daniel Biss, and hold on, let me do the subtraction. In 18 days, I'll be the mayor of Evanston, which is an incredible honor, something I'm excited about, and something I'm anxious about too, if we're being totally honest. It seems like there's an enormous challenge ahead of us. I'm excited to be with you on this this Earth Day, this Earth Week celebration. Excited to contemplate what the city of Evanston can do going forward. We just had an election. We had an election that resulted in a lot of change. We'll have 4 new members of our city council, a new mayor, and a new city clerk, and a tremendous amount of energy people who I believe, regardless of their various differences, are extremely ready to go to make dramatic change. And that's what our planet needs right now. We in Evanston are proud of our climate action and resilience plan, something that's been updated a number of years, most recently just a few years ago, something with strong, ambitious goals, but something which so far is words on paper that needs to be fleshed out in detail. We are going to, if we want to achieve the sustainability goals and the community goals that we've committed to, we're going to need to change the way we do a lot of things. How we live and where we live, how we engage in transportation, how we get from place to place, how we heat our buildings, and how we get and dispose of our food. And these are not changes that can be initiated simply by a single ordinance being passed in the third floor of 2100 Ridge. These are changes that will require all of us to come together. And so as I prepare to become the mayor, as I contemplated whether or not I wanted to run for mayor, the thing that has always been the most exciting to me, that has always most filled me with optimism, is the unbelievable wealth we have of people in this community, of activists, of experts, of people who are prepared to roll up their sleeves and get the work done. And it is very, very clear to me that our ambitious CARP goals will never be met if it is just the 700 remarkable people who work for the city of Evanston government doing the work on their own. It's simply not possible for that limited number of people to do this amount of work. On the other hand, it's equally clear to me that if all of the different people and organizations and communities and constituencies across our city who are passionate about climate action come together as one, we absolutely have the capacity to get it done. So I'm here to say thank you for your continued commitment to do that, and know that I'm going to come to you for help in the course of these next 4 years. Help to build the kind of sustainable city that we have committed to, the kind of sustainable city that I think the overwhelming majority of Evanstonians want to see, and the kind of sustainable city that can be a model for communities around us and communities beyond. So thank you for your readiness to do that work. Thank you for your readiness, I trust, to hold me accountable, and I can't wait to get to work together. And just in time, we've been joined by our current mayor, Steve Haggerty, who's been working in office for these last 4 years, some of which 4 years have been under absurdly difficult circumstances, establishing the city's goals and priorities that set the table for us to do this remarkable work. So thank you, Steve, for that that commitment and that effort, and for your friendship and devotion to Evanston, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Daniel. Chris, I gather I'm supposed to go next, Chris. I know, I hope I didn't mess up, because I thought I was supposed to be on at 8:10, but it's a pleasure to be with you. I remember last year when we gathered for this event, the pandemic had just started, and my remarks last year were that we don't know the complete impact that we're having on the environment, and the fact that we're having a pandemic, it's completely unknown exactly where these viruses stem from and where they come from. But if we're not taking care of the planet and the ecosystem, we ought not be surprised if we find ourselves in this situation more often. And that's just not me, like Steve Haggerty, the mayor of the disaster management consulting, saying that. That's, really renowned professors at, remarkable universities that we have here in the country that have written about that and are looking at that. And so I appreciate what everybody in Evanston is doing, because this is a community that really cares about the environment. And that happened long before I was mayor. We are on our third CARP, so to speak, plan. I think we added resiliency this time, and hence the reason we have the R in it. But this is our third iteration, right, of our climate action plan here in Evanston. And there's a lot of work to be done. This year, in fact, or I say this year, 2020 was to be the year where we had a whole legislative agenda. I mean, we had a big meeting in the Aldermanic Library with me, with some of you that are on this call, some of the folks that are involved in Sunrise at ETHS and everything. And we talked about what we were going to do with Kumar Jensen and others. And I was gung-ho and excited about it. And then all of a sudden we had this pandemic, and the council's attention, understandably, has been focused on making sure that our community is safe and that we're recovering and people are getting vaccinated now and all of that. And we are coming out of that. And we are very much, and I think the transition between me and Daniel is the timing is really good because I really do think like our vaccination rates in this city on a comparative basis to the national, to the state, to Cook County, we're doing really well because people in Evanston are resourceful, and we need to be, as resourceful as we've been with this pandemic on the environment and taking care of it and actually taking the steps that we need to do to put that in place. And so I did want to just sort of leave you with looking forward. I'm not going to talk about the past because you can look at the past and you can see how much we've reduced carbon emissions and all that other good stuff. And we have done a lot in the last 4 years. But as Daniel and the new city council is about to take over, and I know they're very committed to doing the work here on putting the policies and the practices in place that we need. Here are some of the things that as I leave office on May 10th, that I'm thinking about for the next council and the mayor is the city is going to work to expand access to renewable energy, which there's a mailing that's gone out to everybody here in the community by launch that just went out, and that's sort of our renewable energy one. But in the next few weeks, the city will work to expand access to renewable energy by launching a community solar program, which provides solar subscriptions to residents while guaranteeing a cost savings to all participants. Keep a lookout for a press release that's going to come in the next couple of weeks, and that'll come out from the city. Daniel will be the mayor at that point, but there's going to be more done on solar, and we have done some work on solar in the last 4 years. And just if you're not that familiar with solar, in the last 4 years, there are now more than 150 properties in Evanston with rooftop solars, with almost half of those installations happening in 2019 and 2020. So we are seeing a trend where more people are moving to solar. In order to reduce or continue reducing our carbon emissions, Evanston needs to turn its attention to retrofitting buildings. This is big, to retrofitting buildings to make sure they're more energy efficient, reduce their emissions, and eliminate natural gas use, which is responsible for around 40% of our emissions, right? So natural gas is affecting 40% of our emissions. This isn't going to be easy. Okay, there's going to be pushback here, certainly from developers and others, but we've done it before, right, with lead requirements and everything that we've done in this city. So we shouldn't just think, oh, this is hard, let's not do it, because it's going to make a big impact in reduction of reducing carbon emissions. New energy codes also need to be adopted in 2022, so this is just a year away, to ensure that any new buildings built in Evanston don't produce any new greenhouse gas emissions. All right, so buildings produce a lot of gas emissions and we need to do work there. Beyond buildings, the city needs to increase access to composting and recycling services, which I know a lot of folks on this call are working on, so that all businesses and residents have an affordable composting and recycling option. Commercial recycling rates in Evanston are stuck. Okay, and this has been happening for the last couple of years. We were doing a great job. We were getting more and more recycling, and then all of a sudden it's stagnant. And they are stuck at under 10%. And local policies need to be adopted to increase the participation for composting and recycling. There's a big opportunity there. And lastly, the city needs to take proactive actions to prepare for the effects of climate change by evaluating the community's risk and vulnerability to different climate hazards, like extreme heat and flooding. Some of you have seen the big storms, right, that are occurring on Lake Michigan, and then the flooding that happens along our lakefront and all of that. As climate change continues, if we don't get a handle on it, we're going to see more intense storms. We're going to see more flooding along our lakefront. To mitigate that damage along our lakefront, we think it's going to cost about $25 million. It's a lot of money. We had that big storm back in January of 2019. We applied for a federal disaster declaration, as did the city of Chicago and Cook County. We didn't get it. It's not surprising to me, having done this work all over the country, that we didn't get it. But we're going to have to figure out how we build a more resilient community to the effects of climate change that are coming. So lastly, I would just leave you with a kudos to all of you, everyone in the environmental community. You are some of the most effective activists we have here in Evanston. I once heard somebody say, well, you know, Mayor Haggerty doesn't like activists. He's got a big problem with activists. No, I have a big problem with citizens that are against virtually everything, right? And there's a group of people that come and they're against everything. That's not activists. Activists are people who see, you know, big issues that if we don't take action on, there's going to be really bad consequences. And the folks in our affordable housing community are great activists, and the folks in our environmental community here in Evanston are really effective activists. And I just want to thank everybody, Chris and everybody else that's been involved. I know the Unitarian Church is putting this on for us tonight, to just keep being, you know, effective activists. And effective activists aren't those that just sit there and scream at their elected officials and, you know, tell them they don't know what they're incompetent and they don't know what they're doing, but they actually are proactive and sit down at a table and say, hey, this is something and we need to get your buy-in and other people's buy-in. And I think there's a lot of that on the council. There was on the past council, and I think there is on this new council that's about to be seated. So I will continue to be here in Evanston. I'll continue to be involved in issues, and I continue to look forward to the advances we make as a community to take care of our environment. Happy Earth Day, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mayor Haggerty. And thank you to Mayor-elect Biss as well. And up next, we have one of our youth presenters, Noah Silver Matthews. We are so glad he could join us today with an original piece. Noah, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Would you mind if there we are. Okay. My story is a personal narrative. It's about my grief and how the grief of my mother, who I recently lost, and how it's informing my relationship to the earth ongoing. I think that a lot of us are taught to love and to relate by means of extraction. We come from a lot of scars and wounds, and are taught to utilize the motivations that we have in those wounds to take from the people around us, to take from whatever will give it to us, much the same way that we've designed a lot of the way that the world works, be it from geopolitics and economics to just simple communal interactions. And that kind of relationship is destined to splinter and ultimately result where people aren't listening to each other. And so it was through grief that I was able to start to understand a lot more about that, and in my own activism, in my own work in ecological restoration and outdoor education. So on March 15th, throughout the day, my mother, who was in her hospital bed, would repeatedly try to reach up to her mask to remove something that was on her face, tried to get something on her face, and I really couldn't tell what it was. It was a really uncomfortable mask, and we knew that, but nothing that I was going to be able to do that I had seen her try to do before was helping. I felt terrible. I felt completely powerless, and I just remember the terror, feeling like I was going to lose her. But in walking through grief recently, I've actually realized that I lost her many times before, and received a new mother every time, a new way of living and looking at the world. The first time that I experienced this grief was when I was born. My birthday was Wednesday, and so 31 years ago. And that first initial grief is a really sacred experience. It's nature splintering off into an independent being in search of value and ways to receive and experience love in the world. And I believe that it's that grief that opens up our hearts to allow for relation to happen in the first place. I was very lucky. I had a very loving mother, and I accepted it, and she accepted me. Going forward, those losses became more difficult. I experienced abuses of authority at my kindergarten. My siblings left for school very young, and I developed an antagonistic relationship with my father. In that self-righteous, childish rage, I developed the skills to seek the attention and get it that I needed to start to be more of a combative person and demand the kind of attention that I wanted. And in doing so, I turned my house into a battleground, and all of the sacred spaces that my mother held dear, and all of the sacred corners and the playing of the music and the entertaining of the guests was virtually impossible. It was in doing this that I realized that over time, of course, that this is actually a totally natural way that most people experience love. Is you come in with wounds and ultimately experience a level of self-righteousness which drives you and drives all of us to make cynical choices about the way that we consume things, be it through plastic consumption or whatever it is. And I obviously think that corporations and nations hold the brunt of the burden and the responsibility of doing these things, but it starts at home, and it starts with all of us, and it's a lifelong process of healing through it. And my mom, in the face of all of this war, became a much more diminished person. She suffered from chronic depression, and when I tried to address this with her many years later, she wasn't interested in engaging. I came to her with the same amount of demand and self-righteous zeal as before, and so naturally, she wasn't interested in another boy demanding her time. It was about this time that we started to splinter more, and ultimately experience a distance. It was about this time that my mother started to experience symptoms in her left leg that led to a diagnosis of ALS. The way that you search for the diagnosis of ALS is by attempting to confirm every single diagnosis possible except for ALS. They think it's an outside possibility, but it's so rare and uncharted, they would rather not stake their claim on something that they know that they can't fix because it's fatal. This isn't totally dissimilar from the way that I believe a lot of the world leaders are looking at climate change. I think fundamentally the idea of restructuring the world economies around the notion that we should be living in right relationship with the earth is just totally foreign. The notion that we would give up a lot of our privileges, a lot of our ambitions as nations or as corporations or as individuals is ridiculous. And enter in this totally uncharted territory. When I experienced this, the listening, when I heard the diagnosis, I was as self-righteous as ever. I was going to have to put my own healing on hold, and I was going to have to go home and be the best son that I had ever been. I was going to give it all away, and I did, heart full of resentment, and slept on my mother's floor next to the BiPAP machine while it whirred and sent me to sleep. But this is when I discovered a new version of my mother. I lost the old one, and the new one came, and she was a fighter like nobody I had ever met, actually, at that point. I mean, doctors were telling her she was going to die, and she was like, no, looking desperately for every alternative solution and absolutely setting every boundary possible with everyone in her family. I'm constantly amazed in the same way, the way that contemporary climate activists just, the idea of defeat doesn't even occur to them. the idea of giving up in the face of really like terminal diagnosis isn't even an option. And it took the stakes of seeing that in her to really be able to spend the time with her and start to open up and see it. She even started to take a turn and miraculously almost started to make a recovery, but it accelerated, and ultimately on March 16th at 6:15 in the morning, I discovered her body with my siblings, and she was the one that got to choose in this case to take the tube off of her BiPAP mask. I was, of course, I was defeated, but I was extremely grateful. The idea that she would be able to do this for herself in this last moment, to collapse on her own terms, was extremely important to me. And that night, I grieved down from a place inside of myself that I know that I haven't since I was an infant, and really opened up. And now the memory of my mother is something that I can really sit with and start to experience a relationship with her more meaningfully, I think, than I could have in my righteous indignation. I think the relationship with the climate change and activism is an interesting one. I've always been taught to believe, and understandably, and work to prevent collapse, as if it's something that I can do personally or with a bunch of people and halt the world systems and change everything. I don't really think that's how it works anymore. I'm not really sure how we can learn how to do this, but the reality is that the world is going to end, and we need to learn how to relate to who comes next. As Aaron said about mourning, what's going to come after this version of the earth is going to be something that every single day we choose to develop the relationship and communication skills so that we can hear her, so that we can get off our high horse and stop focusing on extraction for all of the values that we hold dear personally to us, that over a lifetime of cynicism and pain has led us to believe that we are righteously allowed to do, and to make time and make space for what she is going to tell us she needs. I hope that in my growth, I become a person that can relate in that way. And I know lots of people in every generation that are already doing it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noah. That was wonderful. Now we have a poetry performance from my good friend Wilbur, joining us from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Wilbur?
Thank you, Lucinda. I'm reading a poem called Warned, written by Sylvia Stultz. The sands of time have been rendered fear. Blue skies on high, no longer clear. Stars were bright whence they came, now dimmed, obstructed, pollution's haze. Crystal clear our waters gleamed. Fish abundance rivers streamed. Ocean floors sandy white, now littered brown, pollution's plight. Trees towered high above, trunks bearing professed love. Birds chirping from sights unseen, gone, paper joined pollution's team. One can't blame pollution alone, as they say you reap what you've sown. So let us all plant a better seed, tear out old roots, cultivate, weed. Protect what has been given for free, our waters, skies, wildlife, and trees. For once they're gone, don't you say, consider yourself warned of that fatal day.
Thank you very much. And now we have a song written and sung by Kristen Lems, one of the organizers of tonight's program. And as you listen and watch, think about what you can do to step up your own involvement in creating a more sustainable planet. Here's the song, 50 Ways to Save the Planet.
So this is called 50 Ways to Save the Planet. The answer is all inside ourselves, she said to me. If you love this planet, you must treat it tenderly. Don't just stand by and watch the problems grow, you see. There must be 50 ways to save the planet. 50 ways to save the planet. Stay away from styrofoam. Bike and leave your car at home. Keep the air conditioning low. Just listen to me. Use your head and use your feet. Don't eat so much red meat. Use the trash cans on the street. And plant a new tree. And plant a new tree. You can ignore it. Hope the problems go away. But 50 species die with each new passing day. It's not enough to hope, it's not enough to pray. There must be 50 ways to save the planet. 50 ways to save the planet. Sort your garbage if you care. Paper here, glass and metal there. Insist on it everywhere. Just listen to me. And when it comes to laundry time, put your clothes on the clothesline. Fresh air will dry them fine. And plant a new tree. And plant a new tree. It's really common sense. There's nothing so profound. There's only so much air and water to go round. Try living simply. It's as easy as it sounds. There must be 50 ways to save the planet. 50 ways to save the planet. When you go to the grocery store, put your cloth bags out the door. No plastic bags anymore. Just listen to me. And when it comes to disposables, always go for reusables. You know it's just sensible. So plant a new tree. And plant a new tree. When you go to the grocery store, take your cloth bags out the door. No plastic bags anymore. Just listen to me. And when disposables, always go for reusables. You know it's just sensible. And plant a new tree. And plant a new tree. And plant a new tree.
Thank you, Kristen. And thanks to all who have joined us this evening to raise the call to save the planet and live in harmony with the life all around us. We want to thank all the presenters and the Unitarian Church of Evanston, especially their tech director, Adam Goff, who is running our online event. We're also incredibly grateful for the environmental work being done across every field, in government, on the individual level, and everywhere in between. So goodbye for now, and happy Earth Day.